Welcome to today's AEC People. I am delighted to be joined by Jeanne Pienaar, who is known to many of you. Has been part of our church for a few years now, actually sits on our finance committee. And great to have you, Jeanne. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Russell.
So Jeanne, just tell us a little bit more about what you do with yourself professionally. What's your job, your career, and your business?
I'm an accountant, and I have my own little practice, which is a one-stop shop, generally a general practitioner of accounting. I have wonderful clients, from the little guy who started his own bin cleaning company through to quite a large corporation. And I thoroughly enjoy the personal relationship I have with the clients, and that is what the fundamental part of my practice is about.
Okay, so you've been an accountant all your career. Is that what you've always done?
No, actually not.
Okay.
My parents were school teachers. We were 5 children. Money was not in abundance. My father was dying when I was applying for universities, and there was no funding.
Right.
The only bursary I could get was a teaching bursary.
Okay.
So I studied accounting to be an accountancy teacher. Lasted 18 months. I actually really enjoyed teaching to a degree, but then a company bought my bursary over, and I was able to study further and progress from there.
Right.
So I actually specialized as a tax practitioner initially, and when the girls were born and I decided to work part-time from home, the accounting side started developing.
Right. And did you always want to be an accountant? I mean,
No.
you said you wanted to be a teacher, but you wanted to teach accountancy, so there was some interest in that?
No, I didn't necessarily want to be a teacher. I got funding from the education department to pay for my studies.
Right, okay.
I wanted to be a nurse.
Very different.
I still think I wanted to be a nurse, but it was a bit of emotional wiggling there from my mum, who thought it was, better to be an accountant or more academically challenging. So it's a bit of a sad story.
So, but you run your own practice now.
I do.
Are you a complete lone ranger? Do you have anyone working with you, or is it...
I have employees, one of whom I deem to be my partner. She's a salaried partner, but we work on a profit share basis, and she's taken over the whole tax side of my practice. I just not interested in working with SARS anymore.
Okay. But it's a basic accounting practice, and
it's a general practice. So everything from bookkeeping and tiny little tax return of interest only through to corporate accounts and reporting. Yes.
Right. Okay.
The full spectrum.
Wow. Okay. So take us back a few years, and where were you born? Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your family.
I was born in Stellenbosch. Both my parents were from Stellenbosch and the district. We ended up living in Oudtshoorn, where I did all my schooling. Right. So it was an interesting, I think it's given me great insight into so much of society's differences, because we grew up English-speaking in an Afrikaans community, to a father born of Scottish immigrants and a mother who was Afrikaans but not an Afrikaner. Right. So we really had our foot in so many doors, and I learned so much, not realizing it at the time, about how society works, and segregation and natural segregation and enforced segregation. So it's great learning curve. So I finished school in Oudtshoorn and studied at Stellenbosch. Right. which is because there were no communists there, said my father. So off we went to Stellenbosch, and interestingly, he had studied there as a little Scottish immigrant,
Right.
and was very happy to have been there at the time. It was a great time of change, and we could become part of that change, from a great naivety through to scales falling off my eyes, being exposed to broader facts which were not facts, and insights.
So were these sort of years of great change in the country when you were at university, and did you get a sense that Stellenbosch University, obviously, which had been the home of the Afrikaner intellectuals, people who were running the country in many ways, did you feel like you were part of a movement that was shifting then?
I wasn't aware of the movement, which was the most frightening part.
Yes.
I mean, I certainly was raised by, there's a lot of history here and context, but I certainly was raised in a family where nobody was lesser than.
Yes.
But politics did not feature. I found out things afterwards, but not as a child. So when I hit Stellenbosch, there was confusion about the blatant racism, but being actively politically didn't feature in my life until my second year, which is when my dad was actually dying. That I think I started being moved by being perhaps distracted by other causes, and I discovered at that stage, NewSAS, and started getting involved there, and it was just more an education for me than a reaction.
Right.
But yes, Stellenbosch was changing, and it was a incredible minority who was changing with it.
Right. Okay. So you went there to study teaching because you had a bursary.
Yes.
And then you got a placement with an accounting firm.
No, I taught at Selborne College in East London for a year. It was the best job anybody could ask for. I was a young woman in an all-boys school who didn't appoint young women as teachers. So I was carried by the male staff, and the boys, I really just did my job and could do no wrong. So it was a fantastic post. But I moved back to Cape Town because this is where my family is.
Right. And what did you do when you came back here?
I taught at Hottentots Holland in Somerset West for 6 months. But in the May, I was approached by somebody in the private sector who asked me if I would be interested in a post. It was obviously a connected person, so I left teaching in a heartbeat. And
is that because you didn't enjoy teaching, or?
The school I was teaching at was horrible. In a very a headmaster makes a school, or headmistress makes a school, and it was a truly Afrikaans type mindset, or I should say, in my mother's words, Afrikaner mindset of being taught what to teach and know your place, and the children, the boys would be caned for hardly. It was just a very unpleasant experience, and the children react to that. So it was very confusing for me. I got into a lot of trouble with this headmaster, and my mouth has always run ahead of my brain. So,
so then you got this offer to work for a company.
For Heads Trust, yes.
As an accountant? Or doing what?
Initially as the internal auditor, and I started studying tax. They were guiding me and sending me on courses, and I continued with my honours and further studies and doing tax diplomas and all sorts. And then worked myself up into the tax department, and then ultimately as what they called a junior trust officer, which is the time when Kirsty came along, and I thought I would just have her in daycare for 12 hours a day whilst climbing the corporate ladder. But 2 days after she was born, I was practically resigning already.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that. Meeting your then husband and starting a family. How did that come about?
Francois and I met in our third year of university. He was, he's a lovely guy. He's a generous guy. He was a very good rugby player, which was important at the time at Stellenbosch campus. It was to be a first-team player. He was like a demigod, and I was quite proud to be by his side. But be that as it may, he's a lovely... Francois Pienaar, indeed.
Quite a famous rugby name.
Eighth man for the University of Stellenbosch. Same time as the other one. But so we eventually got married 6 years later, and unfortunately it didn't quite work out as planned. We both, we grow in different directions, but we got these daughters who I just loved being a mother. I almost sometimes think it was my calling in life. Tried not to dominate and helicopter too much, but I was very drawn to be too much part of their life than I think was always necessary. I'm sure they'd tell you.
Yeah. So 2 daughters?
2 daughters, yes.
Kirsten and
Lauren.
Okay. And so motherhood was something you welcomed, and, you say 2 days after Kirsten was born, wanted to leave work and focus on that. And were you like a full-time mother for a period, or a part-time mother?
I went back to work. Financially at that stage, you're young. We still had a flat, and I wanted to buy a house. So I went back to work for 4 years, less than 4 years. But I went part-time, and very unusually for those times, I started working. They allowed me to take work home with me. So very unusually. And then I went back, resigned, and they asked me to take a section of work to, basically it was subcontracting to me rather than my working from home. And that was how my practice started. Mr. Fairhead himself asked me to take his own friends' portfolios with me, and it just grew organically. Their children and their grandchildren are my clients today. So it was thanks to them that I am practicing.
And did you find a sense of, vocation in your accounting work, in your practice? Did you think, this is what I love, this is what I really want to do, or was it just kind of what you fell into, and it was, a bit more pragmatic than that?
This is where gardeners and landscapers come down to admitting that they actually just love weeding. I love reconciliations and books and order, and it's like puzzle building for me. So fundamental accounting, it just gets my juices flowing. But as you become more senior, it becomes more consultancy driven and information driven, which I also enjoy when I can add value. But I think I am more of an activist than a person who follows regulations. So I tend to start looking for trouble where there isn't trouble in practices, in clients' books, etc. So I don't like people breaking the law. I do believe everybody must pay tax, but I do start taking things on which shouldn't be in my domain, but I can't resist because I see other people doing harm. So I will take on work such as deceased estate because I thought that was very exploitive. I started seeing NPOs being exploited, and so would take work on that I didn't know anything about, but purely because I couldn't stand that side. So all of this came from me weeding in my bookkeeping, but that is how my practice has actually grown into seeing a fault somewhere and then delving into it and learning about it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm aware that you also, as a volunteer, give your time and expertise to various non-profits, including my own organisation. You're one of my board members, but I know, and you're also involved on the finance committee at RUC here.
Yes.
Did that start a few years ago, wanting to, give your time and energy to other causes, and, which other organizations are you involved with?
I've always been drawn to a cause, which is where my political causes started at university.
Yeah.
I've always been drawn to the underdog and to stand up for them.
Yeah.
And being an accountant, I really, again, through one thing leads to another. I didn't actively seek it out, but somebody came to me and they were on a board and they were frustrated, and I went, well, I'm sure I could do this better. And that's how my accounting affiliation started with boards. And really, I think that was as just been a gift almost, and I wish I didn't have to earn the bread and the butter to be able to focus entirely on the financial administration and direction of NPOs, because cash flow is everything, and that is where NPOs struggle. Their administration, their cash flow is not managed because they're driven by people who are passionate about their cause.
Yeah.
And I wish I could get more stuck in it. But yes, I'm involved with REAP in almost a lesser role than I am with two other organizations. Both of the one is a social welfare structure. We're starting at with little children in the less salubrious areas, and they do fantastic work. Metro Kids Africa.
Okay.
Kirsty's actually been involved with them as well. She did concerts for them and did some work for them. And it was through them I've met children and been able to pick up other strings and strands of needs.
Okay. And does it take a lot of your time, your not-for-profit work?
I don't want to admit this on camera, but I don't like parting with a penny. So I decided many years ago is I would tithe my time rather than my money. I mean, I do certainly share way more. I mean, I don't hold on to all my pennies for sure, but I try to stick to 4 hours. I do at least 4 hours a week for 2 or 3 other NPOs, which is often more than the 10%. Because I procrastinate on the other, but I have more fun doing that. But so if that answers your question.
Giving your time, Okay. You touched before about marriage to Francois, that it didn't work out, and so I assume that means you separated and divorced, and you had a period of time, as a single mum with your two girls. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Being a single parent doesn't necessarily mean in a or not in a marriage.
Yes.
So that part didn't affect us much.
Yeah.
We had a dwindling out of a marriage rather than a grand finale.
Yeah.
So it just, we decided to separate, and we had a granny flat at the back of the house, which was my office. He lived there for 2 or 3 years after we got divorced, just to facilitate a relationship between Francois and the girls, yes. And financially it made sense, practically it made sense. So it wasn't a lonely period. There was actually a relief in the final steps. Being called a divorcee, the status, that was never part of my life story program. It was never something I saw as a backdoor. So it was a shock, and it was the first in the family and all those scandals, but it was... I didn't have such a problem, and thankfully my daughters navigated it well as well. They had the insight to see it was better for all of us.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And Jeanne, what role has faith played in your life? Did you grow up as part of the church, and how did you find your way here to RUC?
I have to give a lot of context to this answer, so I'm just going to give you my timeline. I was born into a home where my father was very involved with the church, the Presbyterian Church. My mum was in his shadows as far as I was concerned. And we never realized that she was actually agnostic. But she was an Afrikaans girl in an Afrikaans community. And if you didn't go to church and get the minister's testimonial, you got nowhere in life. And she'd always resented this. But we never realized it because she went to church. She played the organ. But years later, she said it was just for money. So I hope Willem's not listening, but I know they were school teachers, and she was the stand-in organist. So so we went to church as a routine. We had family devotions and all sorts of things. And then in high school, I got involved with the Happy Clappers, as they were then, and I started discovering that if you don't give your life to God, you're going to doom. You are going to burn, and I lived in fear of hell, and I decided I better be reborn. And my father and I started butting heads at this point because I became a Christian and he wasn't. And anyway, it was a horrible phase that I think many people go through, where you become so sanctimonious about you being reborn. And anyway, then my dad got ill. The church started revealing itself to be one of faith but no works. And I got confused. My dad was prayed for but died anyway in a lot of pain. He didn't have the peace. So the whole thing went pear-shaped. And my path left with the churches. And it was... I don't think my mum ever set foot in a church after that, other than weddings and funerals. But I discovered the book of James by fluke one day. I heard somebody quoting, what is your faith without works? And show me, I will show you my faith through my works. And that contradicted so much to Paul's teachings, which had been shoved down our throats of, you have to give your life to God to be saved, and faith is all there is. And that led to a very interesting path of trying to find the right group of people who agreed with me, and my own battle with criticizing Christians who actually were the ones who killed my faith for a long time. So it was an interesting journey. And really, once I started going back to church when Kirsty was born, because I wanted her to learn religion. And to understand our culture from a religious point of view. I still believed, I've always believed, I've never doubted Christ being God for me. But whether he was my savior, I don't know about. But coming to RUC, I finally found a place where it was acknowledged that was okay. And the whole question of, if you're not a Christian, but you have the most tremendous works, you're still doomed, is over, because it's no longer my problem. And I really found that answer here in the absolute inclusivity of anybody and anything, but let's just see what you do and how you do it. And that really is ultimately what matters. And whether or not it is in agreement with the church, it certainly has settled my mind. And whatever the questions are that I can't answer, and the hypocritical quotes and whatnot, it's really not my problem anymore. I'll just do what I think is right and leave the rest to God.
And how did you find your way here?
We had everything in my life is with altercation. We had a little bit of a run-in with the church we were attending up until 2012, 2011. And somebody very close to this church, who was very involved in RUC, said, come and try my congregation. We walked in, and the music. I just didn't want to ever get... we changed immediately. It was the first day because of the music. And Robert's sermon, just to actually have music and to embrace music and to sing hymns properly with an organist who could play. It was just wonderful.
Wonderful. Okay. And Jeanne, outside of work and mothering, what does fun look like for you? What makes you smile and brings you alive?
I'm such a bore. I'm a bit of an introvert
Okay.
in that I like to potter around my house. So I call most of my interests pottering. I will, you know, my friend Hilary says I do things organically. I go out to hang out the laundry, and then I'll find a weed, and that'll lead me to watering a plant and seeing something that was broken. And but 2 hours later, I will have forgotten to do the laundry. But other than that, I do enjoy. I play tennis, which I enjoy, and I take interest in my children's lives. That is an interest, and I enjoy nonfiction tremendously. So I do a lot of reading and
What kind of nonfiction?
history.
Okay.
Yeah, the history and the whys and the start and the
Yes.
foundation of things, etymology, anything that grabs my interest of why it came to be is.
I suspect you also have an interest in good music. I've spotted you at the odd classical concert over the years.
Yes, yes. My father was so strict with us, and we weren't allowed to listen to pop music.
Right.
So we all had, well, I'll speak for myself and my siblings. We listened to a lot of opera as children in the background, and the lightest music we heard was brass band and Scottish folk music.
Okay.
Andy Stewart. And I think my siblings and I can all sing all the words of My Fair Lady, which I think possibly was the lightest we could go. So for years, I did not know who half the bands were that my friends spoke, most of them. But as an adult, I started realizing that it actually was beautiful. So I think my love started subliminally. And certainly opera, did not enjoy until my adulthood. But I love it, and just I'm tone deaf.
Oh, really?
I can't sing in tune whatsoever. I can't sing Happy Birthday in tune.
Well, it sounds like it's a bit of a miracle that you have a daughter who is such a magnificent singer. Where did she get her talent from?
My parents, my father was a beautiful tenor, and my mother was an organist and a pianist.
Yeah.
They were both science teachers, but music was their first love. So it definitely skipped a generation. There are 5 of us, and I think only one of the 5 of us could sing in tune.
Wonderful. And Jeanne, I know you've had quite an adventure recently with a major disaster at your house. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so 4 a.m. on the 8th of February, I was woken to my house burning, and it started due to a power surge, which caused a multi-plug to overheat, which could happen to any of us. It's nothing to do with your electrics or anything like that. So multi-plugs are the enemy number 1 in the insurance world at the moment.
Yes.
I lost my entire office, my server with all my backups gone. And sadly, my off-site backup was at my house, still plugged into my computer that night. So I lost all my work. And then most of our house we've lost, except the bedrooms. The contents of our cupboards in our bedrooms were safe. And thankfully, we converted our garage to a music room, and all the girls' music instruments were there. And thankfully, that was not damaged beyond minor repair. And that would have been possibly the biggest blow after my work.
So how did that affect your business and your clients? And, that must have been quite a setback.
It still is. Yeah. It's difficult. I've always been paper-based. I was raised on paperwork, so I had floor-to-ceiling files. I could tell you where anything was in any file. I would get up and get it for you. So from that point of view, I'm really struggling because I'm having to reconstruct work from my clients are returning reports I'd sent them or stuff like that, but I'd have to rework my own working papers and that kind of thing. My clients have been phenomenal. I think it's been a two-way street. I've always been very loyal to my clients, and in tough times I'd help them, and the wheels turned, and they're almost exclusively standing by me. The only client who's given me a hard time is actually a charity who became resentful, and they've I found that quite ironic. But so from that point of view, being hard, it's hard work, it's high stress work, and you know what? It's surmountable. And I compare myself to others, and I feel so insignificant with my problems in same circumstances. So.
And you've had to move out temporarily and stay somewhere else. So.
Yeah, but again, you know, what a privilege. Our house burned, the insurance took over. They've been fantastic. They moved us they paid our accommodation for 6 months. And while they rebuilt my house, it really, I can complain a lot. It wasn't easy, but in the greater scheme of things.
And are you back home now or
Yes,
soon?
we moved back a few weeks ago. We have no furniture. We have very little furniture. So it's quite fun living in. It's very easy cleaning an empty house, I'll just tell you. We all have a bed and a desk, and an equipped kitchen, and we really enjoy being home.
Right. Okay.
And I got my dog back. My dog was with Francois, my ex-husband, for 6 months. So I'm pleased to have him back.
Okay. A little bird tells me you have reason to travel to the UK every now and then as well. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
I met Gary in 2012. We started seeing each other in 2013. He lives outside Oxford, in a village outside Oxford. And we just became really good friends and are in a very interesting long-term and long-distance relationship. So since 2013.
That's a long time to have a relationship with someone in a completely different continent. I mean, how often do you get to see each other?
Well, we used to see each other 3 to 4 times a year. And then I was in the UK driving to the airport to Heathrow to come back to South Africa when lockdown was announced, both by Boris and Cyril in the same radio broadcast between Oxford and Heathrow. And we didn't see each other for almost 2 years after that. And it was like nothing had really changed, because I think we're both independent, both want to be near our children, for good or bad, and it works.
Right.
We speak every day. He's very good about that.
Lots of Zooming and...
No, we're not so interested in seeing one another anymore. It's more...
Too many wrinkles are getting old.
Too many wrinkles, and really, do I have to sit up straight now? So, but in fact, Gary's the one, he's very good about ensuring, he phones at least once a day and know what each other is doing. And he's just the best friend and such a solid support for me, especially this year. It's been tremendous.
Oh, well. Interesting.
I think, sorry, our builder must be so confused because he gets sketches. Gary's an engineer. So if I'm doing the roof plans will go to Oxford, come back and say, do you think maybe whatever? And I'm going, no, it wasn't me, but I don't really know. So I think he wonders who the heck he was building for. But so, I mean, that kind of support has been phenomenal this year in particular.
Sure. Okay. And finally, what's next for you? Any big changes, any exciting prospects on the horizon?
No. I'm just at the point where I'm waiting and seeing where things going. I've learned to not plan. I've set out on paths that you get to a crossroads and it goes awry before the crossroads gets there. And quite frankly, it's a liberating thing. So I don't know where my relationship with Gary is going. I don't know where my relationship with my current relationship with my girls is going. At the end of this year, we all split up.
might go in different directions.
Yes, certainly Lauren is finishing up her medical degree now, so we don't know where she'll be posted next year. Kirsty, we're hoping to kick off to go to Europe and spread her wings a bit. So quite frankly, I don't know where I'm going, but we'll let you know when I get there.
Fabulous. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jeanne. It's been great to chat and to get to know you a bit better. And thank you for the work you do in this place as well as part of the finance committee. But great to have you.
Thank you.